everyone, welcome back to our chapter book read-along of Percy Jackson and the Olympians, The Lightning Thief by Rick Riordan. We are reading the illustrated copy, which is illustrated by John Rocco. So, we have made it to the last 2 chapters of this epic tale, and I want to know what your favorite parts of this story have been. So, think about it, maybe talk about it if you're watching this with someone, and then we're going to do the quick review because I want to get to this chapter. Percy Jackson is a demigod, which means he has one parent that is a mortal, regular human, and one parent who is a Greek god. His father is the god of the sea, Poseidon. Well, Percy runs into a lot of trouble before he even learns what he is. He has a teacher who turns into a terrifying monster, has to slice her with a sword, and he gets attacked by the Minotaur while he and his mother Sally and his best friend Grover are running to Camp Half-Blood. Luckily, Percy defeats the Minotaur, but not before the Minotaur can grab Percy's mom and she disappears into gold dust. At Camp Half-Blood, Percy meets Dionysus, who is the god of wine, and the camp director. He's kind of grumpy. Well, he also sees someone who used to be his teacher, Mr. Brunner, but is actually named Kirian. He is a centaur and runs the activities at the camp. He has been training heroes for years. Percy also meets a few friends, Luke from the Hermes cabin and Annabeth from the Athena cabin, and one enemy, Clarice, and the rest of her siblings in the Ares cabin. Well, we learn that Percy, Annabeth, and Grover have to go on a quest. There, they are supposed to get the Master Bolt of Zeus, who has lost it. Someone stole his Master Bolt. Well, he thinks his brother Poseidon did it. Poseidon thinks Hades did it. No one knows. So, they are going to go to the underworld to try to get this back. They go on a cross-country trip and run into some problems along the way. They meet his old teacher, Mrs. Dodds, who brings her 2 sisters. They're terrifying. They're called the Furies. They attack. They run into Medusa, who almost turns into stone. A terrifying monster blasts a hole in the side of the St. Louis Arch. They see the god of war, Ares, and he sends them on another mission, and with a magic backpack. Then they go to Las Vegas and get stuck in a casino that has like this weird time warp thing. Ugh. Well, they finally make it to the underworld. Their problems don't stop. They have to get past the 3-headed dog named Cerberus. Then they almost get dragged down to Tartarus, which is where all of the monsters and evil things go. They hear a scary, scary voice. Well, once they made it to Hades' palace, Hades didn't have the Master Bolt, and he was missing his Helm of Darkness. He was convinced that Percy had taken it. And he had pretty good reason, because suddenly, in Percy's backpack, the Master Bolt appeared. Percy had never seen it before, nor felt anything until he got to the underworld. Not good. So, Percy, Annabeth, and Grover barely escape, but have to leave Percy's mom still in that shining gold that Hades has kidnapped her in. Hopefully, we can get her back. But they have to escape, and Percy fights Ares, god of war, who was the person who actually had the Master Bolt and Hades' Helm of Darkness on the beach of Santa Monica. Thing is, Ares didn't seem like the mastermind behind it. He was hearing a voice, and someone else had to steal the stuff in the first place. Ares couldn't have taken it from the other gods. So we'll have to see if we can figure that out. Well, Percy does make Ares bleed ever so slightly and survives the encounter because someone had told Ares not to kill him. Now, we're going to see if Annabeth, Percy, and Grover can make it to the other side of the country by the end of the day and return the Master Bolt to finish their quest. Let's see what happens next in Percy Jackson and the Olympians, The Lightning Thief. Enjoy! Chapter 21. I Settle My Tab. It's funny how humans can wrap their mind around things and fit them into their version of reality. Kirian had told me that long ago. As usual, I didn't appreciate his wisdom until much later. According to the LA News, the explosion at the Santa Monica beach had been caused when a crazy kidnapper fired a shotgun at a police car. He accidentally hit the gas main that had ruptured during the earthquake. This crazy kidnapper, aka Ares, was the same man who had abducted me and two other adolescents in New York and brought us across the country on a 10-day odyssey of terror. Poor little Percy Jackson wasn't an international criminal after all. He'd caused a commotion on that Greyhound bus in New Jersey trying to get away from his captor. And afterward, witnesses would even swear they had seen the leather-clad man on the bus. Why didn't I remember him before? The crazy man had caused the explosion in the St. Louis Arch. After all, no kid could have done that. A concerned waitress in Denver had seen the man threatening his abductees outside her diner, gotten a friend to take a photo, and notified the police. Finally, brave Percy Jackson, I was beginning to like this kid, had stolen a gun from his captor in Los Angeles and battled him shotgun to rifle on the beach. Police had arrived just in time, but in the spectacular explosion, 5 police cars had been destroyed and the captor had fled. No fatalities had occurred. Percy Jackson and his 2 friends were safely in police custody. The reporters fed us this whole story. We just nodded and acted tearful and exhausted, which wasn't hard, and played victimized kids for the camera. All I want, I said, choking back my tears, is to see my loving stepfather again. Every time I saw him on TV, calling me a delinquent punk, I knew somehow we would be okay. And I know he'll want to reward each and every person in this beautiful city of Los Angeles with a free major appliance from his store. Here's the phone number. The police and reporters were so moved that they passed around the hat and raised money for 3 tickets to the next plane to New York. I knew there was no choice but to fly. I hoped Zeus would cut me some slack, considering the circumstances, but it was still hard to force myself on board the flight. Takeoff was a nightmare. Every spot of turbulence was scarier than a Greek monster. I didn't unclench my hands from the armrests until we touched down safely at LaGuardia. The local press was waiting for us outside security, but we managed to evade them, thanks to Annabeth, who lured them away in her visible Yankees cap, shouting, "They're over by the frozen yogurt! Come on!" Then rejoined us at baggage claim. We split up at the taxi stand. I told Annabeth and Grover to get back to Half-Blood Hill and let Carrion know what had happened. They protested, and it was hard to let them go after all we'd been through, but I knew I had to do this last part of the quest by myself. If things went wrong, if the gods didn't believe me, I wanted Annabeth and Grover to survive to tell Carrion the truth. I hopped in a taxi and headed into Manhattan. 30 minutes later, I walked into the lobby of the Empire State Building. I must have looked like a homeless kid with my tattered clothes and my scraped-up face, and I hadn't slept in at least 24 hours. I went up to the guard at the front desk and said, 600th floor. He was reading a huge book with a picture of a wizard on the front. I wasn't much into fantasy, but the book must have been good, because the guard took a while to look up. "No such floor, kiddo." "I need an audience with Zeus," I said. He gave me a vacant smile. "Sorry?" "You heard me," I said. I was about to decide this guy was just a regular mortal, and I'd better run before he called the straitjacket patrol, when he said, "No appointment, no audience, kiddo. Lord Zeus doesn't see anyone unannounced." "Oh, I think he'll make an exception." I slipped off my backpack and unzipped the top. The guard looked inside at the metal cylinder, not getting what it was for a few seconds. Then his face went pale. "That isn't—" "Yes, it is," I promised. "You want me to take it out and—" No! He scrambled out of his seat, fumbled around the desk for a key card, then handed it to me. "Insert this in the security slot. Make sure nobody else is in the elevator with you." I did as he told me. As soon as the elevator doors closed, I slipped the key into the slot. The card disappeared, and a new button appeared on the console. A red one that said, 600. I pressed it and waited. And waited. Muzak played. Raindrops keep falling on my head. Finally, ding! The doors slid open. I stepped out and almost had a heart attack. I was standing on a narrow stone walkway in the middle of the air. Below me was Manhattan, from the height of an airplane. In front of me, white marble steps wound up the spine of a cloud into the sky. My eyes followed the stairway to its end, where my brain just could not accept what I saw. Look again, my brain said. We're looking, my eyes insisted. It's really there. From the top of the clouds rose the decapitated peak of a mountain, its summit covered with snow. Clinging to the mountainside were dozens of multi-leveled palaces, a city of mansions, all with white-columned porticos, gilded terraces, and bronze braziers glowing with 1,000 fires. Roads wound crazily up to the peak, where the largest palace gleamed against the snow. Precariously perched gardens bloomed with olive trees and rose bushes. I could make out an open-air market filled with colorful tents, a stone amphitheater built on one side of the mountain, a hippodrome, and a colosseum on the other. It was an ancient Greek city, except it wasn't in ruins. It was new and clean and colorful, the way Athens must have looked 2,500 years ago. This place can't be here, I told myself. The tip of a mountain hanging over New York City like a billion-ton asteroid? How could something like this be anchored above the Empire State Building, in plain sight of millions of people, and not get noticed? But here it was, and here I was. My trip through Olympus was a daze. I passed some giggling wood nymphs who threw olives at me from their garden. Hawkers on the market offered to sell me ambrosia on a stick, and a new shield, and a genuine glitter-weave replica of the Golden Fleece, as seen on Hephaestus TV. The 9 muses were tuning their instruments for a concert in the park, while a small crowd gathered, satyrs and naiads, and a bunch of good-looking teenagers who might have been minor gods and goddesses. Nobody seemed worried about an impending civil war. In fact, everybody seemed in a festive mood. Several of them turned to watch me pass, and whispered to themselves. I climbed the main road, toward the big palace at the peak. It was a reverse copy of the palace in the underworld. There, everything had been black and bronze. Here, everything glittered white and silver. I realized Hades must have built his palace to resemble this one. He wasn't welcomed in Olympus except on winter solstice, so he built his own Olympus underground. Despite my bad experience with him, I felt a little sorry for the guy. To be banished from this place seemed really unfair. It would make anybody bitter. Steps led up to a central courtyard. Past that, the throne room. Room really isn't the right word. The place made Grand Central Station look like a broom closet. Massive columns rose into a domed ceiling, which was gilded with moving constellations. 12 thrones, built for beings the size of Hades, were arranged in an inverted U, just like the cabins at Camp Half-Blood. An enormous fire crackled in the central hearth pit. The thrones were empty, except for 2 at the end, the head throne on the right and the one to its immediate left. I didn't have to be told who the 2 gods were that were sitting there, waiting for me to approach. I came toward them, my legs trembling. The gods were in giant human form, as Hades had been, but I could barely look at them without feeling a tingle, as if my body were starting to burn. Zeus, the lord of the gods, wore a dark blue pinstriped suit. He sat on a simple throne of solid platinum. He had a well-trimmed beard, marble gray and black like the storm cloud. His face was proud and handsome and grim, his eyes rainy gray. As I got nearer to him, the air crackled and smelled of ozone. The god sitting next to him was his brother, without a doubt, but was dressed very differently. He reminded me of a beachcomber from Key West. He wore leather sandals, khaki Bermuda shorts, and a Tommy Bahama shirt
with coconuts and parrots all over it. His skin was deeply tanned, his hands scarred like an old-time fisherman's. His hair was dark, like mine. His face had the same brooding look that had always gotten me branded as a rebel. But his eyes, sea green like mine, were surrounded by sun crinkles that told me he smiled a lot too. His throne was a deep-sea fisherman's chair. It was simple, swiveling kind, with black leather seat and a built-in holster for a fishing pole. Instead of a pole, the holster held a bronze trident, flickering with green light around the tips. The gods weren't moving or speaking, but there was tension in the air, as if they'd just finished an argument. I approached the fisherman's throne and knelt at his feet. Father. I dared not look up. My heart was racing. I could feel the energy emanating from the two gods. If I said the wrong thing, I had no doubt they would blast me into dust. To my left, Zeus spoke.
Should you not address the master of this house first, boy?
I kept my head down and waited.
Peace, brother,
Poseidon finally said. His voice stirred my oldest memories. That warm glow I remembered as a baby. The sensation of this god's hand on my forehead.
The boy defers to his father. It is only right. You still claim him, then?
Zeus asked, menacingly.
You claim this child whom you sired against our sacred oath? I have admitted my wrongdoing, Poseidon said. Now I would hear him speak.
Wrongdoing? A lump welled up in my throat. Was that all I was? A wrongdoing? The result of a god's mistake?
I have spared him once already,
Zeus grumbled.
Daring to fly through my domain? Ha! I should have blasted him out of the sky for his impudence. And risk destroying your own master bolt? Poseidon asked calmly. Let us hear him out, brother.
Zeus grumbled some more.
I shall listen, he decided. Then I shall make up my mind whether or not to cast this boy down from Olympus.
Perseus, Poseidon said, look at me. I did, and I wasn't sure what I saw in his face. There was no clear sign of love or approval, nothing to encourage me. It was like looking at the ocean. Some days you could tell what mood it was in. Some days, though, it was unreadable, mysterious. I got the feeling Poseidon really didn't know what to think of me. He didn't know whether he was happy to have me as his son or not. In a strange way, I was glad that Poseidon was so distant. If he tried to apologize, or told me he loved me, or even smiled, it would have felt fake. Like a human dad making some lame excuse for not being around. I could live with that. After all, I wasn't sure about him yet either.
Address Lord Zeus, boy, Poseidon told me. Tell him your story.
So I told Zeus everything. Just as it had happened, I took out the metal cylinder, which began sparking in the sky god's presence, and laid it at his feet. There was a long silence, broken only by the crackle of the hearth fire. Zeus opened his palm. The lightning bolt flew into it. As he closed his fist, the metallic points flared with electricity, until he was holding what looked more like a classic thunderbolt, a 20-foot javelin of arching, hissing energy that made the hairs on my scalp rise.
I sense the boy tells the truth, Zeus muttered. But that Ares would do such a thing. It's most unlike him. He is proud and impulsive, Poseidon said. It runs in the family.
Lord? I said. They both said,
yes?
Ares didn't act alone. Someone else, something else, came up with the idea. I described my dreams and the feeling I had had on the beach, that momentary breath of evil that seemed to stop the world and made Ares back off from killing me. In the dreams, I said, the voice told me to bring the bolt to the underworld. Ares hinted that he'd been having some dreams too. I think he was being used, just like I was, to start a war.
You're accusing Hades after all?
Zeus asked. No, I said. I mean, Lord Zeus, I've been in the presence of Hades. This feeling on the beach was different. It was the same thing I felt when I got close to that pit. That was the entrance to Tartarus, wasn't it? Something powerful and evil is stirring down there. Something even older than the gods. Poseidon and Zeus looked at each other. They had a quick, intense discussion in ancient Greek. I only caught one word. Father. Poseidon made some kind of suggestion, but Zeus cut him off. Poseidon tried to argue. Zeus held up his hand angrily.
We will speak of this no more,
Zeus said.
I must go personally to purify this thunderbolt in the waters of Lemnos, to remove the human taint from its metal.
He rose and looked at me. His expression softened just a fraction of a degree.
You have done me a service, boy. Few heroes could have accomplished as much.
I had help, sir, I said. Grover Underwood and Annabeth Chase.
To show you my thanks, I shall spare your life. I do not trust you, Percy Jackson. I do not like what your arrival means for the future of Olympus. But, for the sake of peace in my family, I shall let you live.
Thank you, sir?
Do not presume to fly again. Do not let me find you here when I return. Otherwise, you shall taste this bolt, and it shall be your last sensation.
Thunder shook the palace. With a blinding flash of lightning, Zeus was gone. I was alone in the throne room with my father.
Your uncle,
Poseidon sighed,
has always had a flair for dramatic exits. I think he would have done well as the god of theatre.
An uncomfortable silence. Sir, I said, what was in the pit? Poseidon regarded me.
Have you not guessed?
Kronos, I said, the king of the Titans. Even in the throne room of Olympus, far away from Tartarus, the name Kronos darkened the room, made the hearth fire not seem quite as warm on my back. Poseidon gripped his trident.
In the first war, Percy, Zeus cut our father Kronos into 1,000 pieces, just as Kronos had done to his own father, Ouranos. Zeus cast Kronos' remains into the darkest pit of Tartarus. The Titan army was scattered, their mountain fortress on Etna destroyed, their monstrous allies driven to the farthest corners of the earth. And yet, Titans cannot die, any more than we gods can. Whatever is left of Kronos is still alive in some hideous way, still conscious in his eternal pain, still hungering for power.
He's healing, I said. He's coming back. Poseidon shook his head.
From time to time over the eons Kronos has stirred. He enters men's nightmares and breathes evil thoughts. He wakens restless monsters from the depths. But to suggest he could rise from the pit is another thing.
That's what he intends, father. That's what he said. Poseidon was silent for a long time.
Lord Zeus has closed discussion on this matter. He will not allow talk of Kronos. You have completed your quest, child. That is all you need to do.
But I stopped myself. Arguing would do no good. It would very possibly anger the only god who I had on my side. As you wish, father. A faint smile played on his lips.
Obedience does not come naturally for you, does it?
No, sir.
I must take some of the blame for that, I suppose. The sea does not like to be restrained.
He rose to his full height and took up his trident. Then he shimmered and became the size of a regular man, standing directly in front of me.
You must go, child. But first, know that your mother has returned.
I stared at him, completely stunned. My mother?
You will find her at home. Hades sent her when you recovered his helm. Even the Lord of Death pays his debts.
My heart was pounding. I couldn't believe it. Would you? I wanted to ask if Poseidon would come with me to see her, but then I realized that was ridiculous. I imagined loading the sea god into a taxi and taking him to the Upper East Side. If he'd wanted to see my mom all these years, he would have. And then there was smelly Gabe to think about. Poseidon's eyes took on a little sadness.
When you return home, Percy, you must make an important choice. You will find a package waiting in your room.
A package?
You will understand when you see it. No one can choose your path, Percy. You must decide.
I nodded, though I didn't know what he meant.
Your mother is a queen among women,
Poseidon said wistfully.
I had not met such a mortal woman in 1,000 years. Still, I am sorry you were born, child. I brought you a hero's fate, and a hero's fate is never happy. It is never anything but tragic.
I tried not to feel hurt. Here was my own dad telling me he was sorry I'd been born. I don't mind, Father.
Not yet, perhaps, he said. Not yet. But it was an unforgivable mistake on my part.
I'll leave you then. I bowed awkwardly. I won't bother you again. I was 5 steps away when he called,
Perseus.
I turned. There was a different light in his eyes, a fiery kind of pride.
You did well, Perseus. Do not misunderstand me. Whatever else you do, know that you are mine. You are the true son of the sea god.
As I walked back through the city of gods, conversation stopped. The muses paused their concert. People and satyrs and naiads all turned toward me, their faces filled with respect and gratitude. And as I passed, they knelt, as if I was some kind of hero. 15 minutes later, still in a trance, I was back on the streets of Manhattan. I caught a taxi to my mom's apartment, rang the doorbell, and there she was, my beautiful mother, smelling of peppermint and licorice, the weariness and worry evaporating from her face as soon as she saw me. Percy! Oh, thank goodness! Oh, my baby! She crushed the air right out of me. We stood in the hallway as she cried and ran her hands through my hair. I'll admit it, my eyes were a little misty too. I was shaking. I was so relieved to see her. She told me she just appeared in the apartment that morning, scaring Gabe half out of his wits. She didn't remember anything since the Minotaur, and couldn't believe it when Gabe told her that I was a wanted criminal, traveling across the country, blowing up national monuments. She'd been going out of her mind with worry all day, because she hadn't heard the news. Gabe had forced her to go into work, saying she had a month's salary to make up for, and she'd better get started. I swallowed back my anger and told her my own story. I tried to make it sound less scary than it had been, but it wasn't easy. I was getting to the fight with Ares when Gabe's voice interrupted from the living room.
Hey, Sally! The meatloaf done yet or what?
She closed her eyes. He isn't going to be happy to see you, Percy. The store got 500,000 phone calls today from Los Angeles. Something about free appliances? Oh yeah, about that. She managed a weak smile. Just don't make him angrier, all right? Come on in. In the month I'd gone, the apartment had turned into Gabe land. Garbage was ankle deep on the carpet. The sofa had been reupholstered in beer cans. Dirty socks and underwear hung off the lampshades. Gabe and 3 of his big, goony friends were playing poker at the table. When Gabe saw me, his cigar dropped out of his mouth. His face got redder than lava.
You got nerve coming here, you little punk. I thought the police...
He's not a fugitive after all, my mom interjected. Isn't that wonderful, Gabe? Gabe looked back and forth between us. He didn't seem to think my homecoming was so wonderful.
Bad enough I had to give back your life insurance money, Sally, he growled. Give me the phone. I'll call the cops.
Gabe, no! He raised his eyebrows.
Did you just say no? You think I'm gonna put up with this punk again? I can still press charges against him for ruining my Camaro.
But... He raised his hand, and my mother flinched. For the first time, I realized something. Gabe had hit my mother. I didn't know when or how much, but I was sure he'd done it. Maybe it had been going on for years, when I wasn't around. A balloon of anger started expanding in my chest. I came toward Gabe, instinctively taking my pen out of my pocket. He just laughed.
What, punk? You're gonna write on me? You touch me, and you're going to jail forever. You understand?
Hey, Gabe, his friend Eddie interrupted. He's just a kid. Gabe looked at him resentfully and mimicked his falsetto voice.
Just a kid.
The other friends laughed like idiots.
I'll be nice to you, punk.
Gabe showed me his tobacco-stained teeth.
I'll give you 5 minutes to get your stuff and clear out. After that, I call the police.
Gabe! My mother pleaded.
He ran away, Gabe told her. Let him stay gone.
I was itching to uncap Riptide, but even if I did, the blade didn't hurt humans. And Gabe, by the loosest definition, was human. My mother took my arm. Please, Percy, come on, we'll go to your room. I let her pull me away, my hands still trembling with rage. My room had been completely filled with Gabe's junk. There were stacks of used car batteries, a rotting bouquet of sympathy flowers with a card from someone who'd seen his Barbara Walters interview. Gabe is just upset, honey, my mother told me. I'll talk to him later. I'm sure we can work it out. Mom, it'll never work out. Not as long as Gabe's here. She wrung her hands nervously. I'll take you to work with me for the rest of the summer. In the fall, maybe there's another boarding school. Mom, I said. She lowered her eyes. I'm trying, Percy. I need some time. A package appeared on my bed. At least, I could have sworn it hadn't been there a moment before. It was a battered cardboard box, about the right size to fit a basketball. The address on the mailing slip was in my own handwriting. The Gods, Mount Olympus, 600th floor, Empire State Building, New York, New York. With best wishes, Percy Jackson. Over the top in black marker, in a man's clear bold print, was the address of our apartment, and the words, Return to Sender. Suddenly, I understood what Poseidon had said to me on Olympus. A package, a decision.
Whatever else you do, know that you are mine. You're a true son of the sea god.
I looked at my mother. Mom, do you want Gabe gone? Percy, it isn't that simple. Mom, just tell me. That jerk has been hitting you. Do you want him gone or not? She hesitated, then nodded almost imperceptibly. Yes, Percy, I do. And I'm trying to get up my courage to tell him, but you can't do this for me. You can't solve my problems. I looked at the box. I could solve her problem. I wanted to slice that package open, plop it on the poker table, and take out what was inside. I could start my very own statue garden, right here in the living room. That's what a Greek hero would do in the stories, I thought. That's what Gabe deserves. But a hero story always ended in tragedy. Poseidon had told me that. I remember the underworld. I thought about Gabe's spirit drifting forever in the fields of asphodel, or condemned to some hideous torture behind the barbed wire of the fields of punishment. An eternal poker game? Sitting up to his waist in boiling oil, listening to opera music? Did I have the right to send someone there? Even Gabe? A month ago, I wouldn't have hesitated. Now, I can do it, I told Mom. One look inside the box, and he'll never bother you again. She glanced at the package and seemed to understand immediately. No, Percy, she said, stepping away. You can't. Poseidon called you a queen, I told her. He said he hadn't met a woman like you in 1,000 years. Her cheeks flushed. Percy, you deserve better than this, Mom. You should go to college. Get your degree. You can write your novel. Meet a nice guy, maybe. Live in a nice house. You don't need to protect me anymore by staying with Gabe. Let me get rid of him. She wiped a tear off her cheek. You sound so much like your father, she said. He offered to stop the tide for me once. He offered to build me a palace at the bottom of the sea. He told me he could solve all my problems with a wave of his hand. What's wrong with that? Her multicolored eyes seemed to search inside me. I think you know, Percy. I think you're enough like me to understand. If my life is going to mean anything, I have to live it myself. I can't let a god take care of me, or my son. I have to find the courage on my own. Your quest has reminded me of that. We listened to the sound of the poker chips and swearing. ESPN from the living room. I'll leave the box, I said. If he threatens you. She looked pale, but she nodded. Where will you go, Percy? Half-Blood Hill. For the summer or forever? I guess that depends. We locked eyes, and I sensed that we had an agreement. We would see how things stood at the end of the summer. She kissed my forehead. "You'll be a hero, Percy. You'll be the greatest of them all." I took one last look around my bedroom. I had a feeling I'd never see it again. Then I walked with my mother to the front door.
"Leaving so soon, punk?"
Gabe called after me.
"Good riddance."
I had one last twinge of doubt. How could I turn down the perfect chance to take revenge on him? I was leaving here without saving my mother.
"Hey, Sally," he yelled. "What about that meatloaf, huh?"
A steely look of anger flared in my mother's eyes, and I thought, just maybe, I was leaving her in good hands after all. Her own. "The meatloaf is coming right up, dear," she told Gabe. "Meatloaf surprise." She looked at me and winked. The last thing I saw as the door swung closed was my mother staring at Gabe, as if she were contemplating how he would look as a garden statue.
All right, well, that was the end of that chapter. We have one chapter left, but I want to discuss some things and also look at our map because it's finally completed. Percy, Annabeth, and Grover made it to all of the locations on their quest map. So we see they started over here in New York, went all the way across the country, and then I made a little dotted line to bring them back to the Empire State Building in New York City. They've completed their quest, and we completed our map. Awesome! Let's discuss what happened in this chapter. So when the Los Angeles reporters interview Percy, how does he get back at Gabe? So we learned a little bit along the way that Gabe blamed Percy for his wife disappearing and for his Camaro blowing up, and he wanted to get rid of Percy, so he blamed it all on him. Well, the interviewers realized it isn't Percy's fault. They actually blamed Ares for all of it, but that's not too far off the correct thing, is it? But how does Percy get back at Gabe? He tells them the phone number for the place that Gabe works and says that he will get them free appliances for taking care of his son. Oh boy. Why do Percy, Annabeth, and Grover split up when they arrive to New York? A couple reasons, right? So Percy knows that he has to complete this quest on his own. It was officially his quest, and he brought Grover and Annabeth along with him. So Percy knew that he needed to complete this all by himself. Also, he was afraid if something went bad, the gods would kill him. So he didn't want Annabeth and Grover to be there as well and possibly get hurt. And he wanted the truth to get to Kyrian at Camp Half-Blood. So he sent Annabeth and Grover there, and he took the Master Bolt to the Empire State Building. Speaking of the Empire State Building, how did Percy convince the doorman, or the elevator guard, to let him in to the elevator all the way up to Olympus? Well, he said, "I need to see Zeus." And the guy was like, he can't see. Then he showed him what was in his backpack, right? What was it? The Master Bolt. So yeah, he let him up. What are some of the things that Percy saw on his way through Olympus? Well, the first thing was it's floating literally above the Empire State Building. It looks like there's a mountain kind of like cut off and just floating there on top of the building. Thought that was pretty cool. Then he sees a lot of other nymphs, which are those tree spirits, and satyrs like Grover, and maybe some other like minor gods walking around. They had a market, so they were trying to sell him things. There was a amphitheater, which is where music is played. There was a concert getting ready to start. And then finally, he saw Zeus's palace. It was huge. And what did it remind him of? It reminded him of Hades' palace. it looks very, very similar, except Hades' palace was all black and like gold and gray, and then Zeus's palace is white and silver and very bright. So why did that make Percy feel a little sorry for Hades when he saw how similar they were? The thing about Hades is they only let him, in the myths, they only let him on Mount Olympus one time a year, called the winter solstice, which is right around Christmas time. It's when winter begins. It's the darkest day of the year. So they allow him up on Mount Olympus at that time. No other day is he allowed there. So Percy was kind of feeling sorry for him. No wonder he wanted to build his palace to look exactly like this. He was left out. So he gets to see two pretty big gods. It was Zeus and who else? His father, Poseidon. I like how they're depicted in here. So Zeus looks like a businessman, right? But he still has that long hair. And then Poseidon looks like a fisherman. Even his seat looks like a fisherman. He's tanned. But you can tell that he smiled a lot because he has little crinkles in his eyes. Very cool. So Zeus and Poseidon believe Percy's story, luckily, and take back the Master Bolt. Zeus tells Percy that he is going to reward him. How does he reward him? That he's going to reward him by not killing him. I guess that's helpful. So Percy and his dad Poseidon start talking, and they talk about who was speaking from the pit. Who was it? His name is Kronos, and in these Greek myths, he is Poseidon, Zeus, and Hades and Hera, I think's father. He, maybe Demeter, I can't remember. I'll have to look that up. But he was very, very bad. He literally ate his children. It was gross. Greek myths are very odd. But in the end, Zeus defeated him and they sent him into the pit of Tartarus. Now, Poseidon says every once in a while people hear voices and he tries to stir up trouble. But why does Percy think that this is different? Well, there was one thing that happened while they were down there in Tartarus, right? It pulled them in. It tried to bring them to him. So he's trying to get out of the pit. And that is very worrisome. But Zeus doesn't want to talk about it. He says it's not going to happen. Because he defeated him and he doesn't want to admit that maybe he's not totally defeated. Finally, we get back to Percy's apartment. And who is there? His mom! So exciting. She is back. She is still happy to see Percy. A little traumatized by all the things he went through. But she is back. And wonderful as ever. Well, the person who is also there and not wonderful at all is Gabe. Smelly Gabe, that is Percy's stepfather. Is just not a nice guy. We found out during the story that Percy's mom actually married him to kind of mask how Percy is a demigod. So because Gabe is so smelly and just so very, very human and he hides the fact from monsters that Percy is a demigod. So monsters didn't find him because Sally married this really not nice guy. Well, monsters know he exists. So Percy was telling her, hey, you don't have to stick with this guy. You don't have to protect me all the time. And he gets a present back on his bed. What did he get? Do you remember? It's Medusa's head. Ooh. But we learned earlier that that can still turn people into stone. So Percy leaves it for his mom just to see if she wants to do something with it. All right, we will see what happens in our final chapter of Percy Jackson and the Olympians, the Lightning Thief, in our next video. I can't wait to see you there and wrap up this excellent adventure. Bye, everyone.